All right. I think the big story, of course, is as we wind down this year is what the year ahead looks like. And a great report out there by Axis Bank, which says turbulence globally, but drivers remain local. We're speaking now with Neelkant Mishra, Chief Economist at Axis Bank and Head of Global Research. Neelkant, pleasure as always to have you on NDTV Profit, and thank you so much for your time. I was going through parts
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I was going through parts of the report, and I think when you talk about global turbulence, let me start from there, and then of course we'll get to the India impact. The biggest factor of turbulence or the unknown, perhaps, is what the new president in the US will do? And is there any way to assess whether that will be a negative or a positive?
No, I don't think so. It is not going to be very easy to on whether this is negative or positive for India. But what is likely to happen is that it will increase the noise levels in the markets. It will increase uncertainty of future, and what that does is it starts to slow down activity globally. So, starting with his inauguration on the 20th of January, I think we all need to be on standby on the nature of policies that he pushes through. Remember that this time he's going to be much better prepared than he was the last time, with his own team in place, with having some lead time in deciding on policies which will not be stalled by the two houses of legislature or even the courts. And therefore the likelihood of them seeing the light of day are very high. But at the same time, remember that the second and third order effects are also going to be very important. So if he starts with a trade war against China, remember that since 2016, global growth in exports ex-China and global growth in imports ex-US have both been pretty abysmal. So if both these parties are starting to start a trade war, it can be quite disruptive. What can also disrupt is the currency levels. So if the RMB was allowed to depreciate, and remember that in the last year or so, we have seen several steps from the Chinese government which suggests that they can allow the RMB to depreciate. So they've recently changed their stance from prudent to accommodative. They have also allowed the central bank several months back to start monetizing government debt if necessary. So there are several steps that can be very interesting in terms of second and third order effects. But at the same time, let me not just highlight the US presidency, or at least the first 2 months, say, of President Trump. But there are also interesting things happening in Europe. Europe had a very weak 2024. There are significant political changes likely. So Germany is going to the polls. France is going through its own turbulence. The spread between the bond yields of France and Germany is the highest we've seen in a while. And so that's leading to some expectation of what the ECB may do. In China internally, there is a risk of deflation. So there are lots of interesting things that are going to happen globally. But as you highlighted from our note, the trend of growth in India is still likely to be driven primarily by local factors and our monetary and fiscal stance.
Of course, and that is, I would say, the core of the India story. But just to take that forward, Neelkant, and I wonder if this is a optimistic view and whether you share it at all, between what could be a potential trade war and the US on one side, China on the other side, the globe shaking up, geopolitical tension which is still continuing, no signs of easing. Is it correct to say that India is standing out as a safe haven, domestic stability, relative economic stability, while all of this is going on?
I think so. So I think the growth rates in India, and so this is, of course, expecting that the necessary fiscal and financial interventions are underway and they should support growth back to the trend level. I do think that there is sufficient internal demand in India for India to maintain a 7% type of growth level. With a much stronger reserves position, it is a lot less vulnerable to external shocks through the currency route. Though I must say that it would be prudent, in our view, to allow the currency to be a lot more volatile than it has been. It is currently among the least volatile currencies in the world. It has to start becoming more volatile so that the economy is better prepared and the RBI is not incurring all the costs of currency stabilization. In our dependency on external capital, so already the current account deficit that we are sustaining is close to 1%, which is way lower than the 2.5% to 3% what we used to target 15 years back. So on many measures, I think we are much better prepared than you used to be in earlier rounds of global volatility. And if we manage the fiscal and monetary side well, I think our growth should be quite good as well.
Neelkant, good afternoon, Neeraj here, and thanks for speaking to us. What are the risks, that you look at? Are these, or would these largely be external risks for India in 2025 in terms of global growth, etc.? Or could it be internal as well? Currently we are grappling with China dumping, flows out into the US, multiple things, all of which seem external.
Well, there is some merit in what you say, but I think that the growth slowdown that we have gone through, and therefore the impact, the negative impact on the market, is all internal. So, see, what we saw in, say, the FII outflows, right? So when US 10-year yields bottomed out at 3.6% in September, and then rebounded to 4.4 plus by mid-November, there was a wave of outflows from emerging market funds. And so the $10-11 billion that we saw going out in October was 0.2% of our market cap. There were several other economies that also saw similar outflows. In fact, on a rolling 12-month basis, Vietnam has seen 1.2 percentage points of market cap worth of outflows. In India, we are still positive on that count. So the reason, but the market performance, so despite the fact that the extent of outflows as a percentage of market cap was not exceptional, the performance of Indian market was among the worst among all emerging markets. And I think the reason for that was that our growth expectations were being revised down, and we went through a spate of about 4-week period of very brutal earnings cuts as earnings persistently disappointed. Now, so the bigger question is, why did that happen, and were the factors external or internal? So while there are issues with excess Chinese capacity, there are sectors like chemicals or metals which are very badly affected by Chinese dumping. But at an overall economic level, the growth slowdown that happened to 5.4% in the second quarter was primarily driven by an unintended strong fiscal tightening, which is now reversing, because that was not what the full year number was supposed to be. And secondly, and equally importantly, a very sharp slowdown in credit growth. So if your system credit growth slows down from 16.5% to say 11 to 12%, that's a substantial level of slowdown. Now, some of it was intended, the unsecured loans and the MFIs, but that's a very small part of the overall market. It was because on the quantitative side, there was not enough money in the system. The fact that, because the structure of the financial system today is very different, the tier 1 capital that the banks hold and the equity that the NBFCs hold is way higher than it used to be. And therefore, the thresholds for loan deposit ratio at which the central bank started to ask the financial firms to slow down the credit was perhaps not right. And therefore, when you see a very sharp slowdown in credit growth and unintended pace of fiscal tightening, which was quite extreme, it is bound to be result in a very strong negative surprise for GDP, and that manifested itself into the earnings cuts that we saw.
Okay. Therefore, the question that comes to mind is, the near term, let's say, because included in Outlook 2025 would be a case of whether the capex which is kind of stalled, is the government spending already and will it spend more in, let's say, Jan, and will therefore, yes, the second half will look more balanced than the first half, but could there be a sharp uptick, or would you rather it not be a sharp uptick, even if it can be?
No, I think it is likely to be reasonably sharp uptake on the fiscal side, on the monetary side, on the financial side. I'll explain what
Also
I mean.
on the capex side, what I meant to ask.
So let's see the fiscal numbers first. Yeah, capex. Yeah, so see, actually, capex or revex or revenue expenditure is it's relevant at the second level. The first thing is whether the quantum of spending is happening or not. So in the first half of this fiscal year, the central government incurred about 29% of its full year fiscal deficit. In the 10-year median, in the first half is 62%. So there is a 33% of fiscal deficit, which normally would have been incurred but was not. Now, 33% of 4.9% of GDP is 1.6% of GDP. That was the extent of unintended tightening squeezed into 6 months. So if you were to annualize it, the numbers are much bigger. Now, so this is really strong pace of consolidation. Now, if the government was to meet its 4.9% of deficit fiscal target, GDP fiscal deficit target, the expenditure has to be in excess of receipts in a meaningful way in the second half. In October, we have already seen signs of that. So the first objective has to be to incur that deficit, because from a macro perspective, higher deficits mean support to growth, lower deficits mean a headwind to growth. So the first is to actually spend it. Where capex and revex start to make a difference is in the multiplier. So whether you use those 100 crore rupees to build a road or to give it to someone to spend, in the first round, the money spent is 100 crores, because even if you're building a road, you are buying bitumen and labor and leasing equipment and all that. Where capex helps is that the second and third year impact is also meaningful. Once the road is built, it improves productivity and all that. But at this stage, I think the first target and then the first monitorable for us is what is the extent of the fiscal deficit. Now, you're right that the capex is where the money is best spent. From what the government machinery is talking about in the public, out of the 11.1 trillion rupees, they're saying that they should be able to spend about 10.5 trillion rupees. The slippage is mostly going to happen in the interest-free loans for capex to states, where the states may not draw down some of those, especially because of some of the conditions imposed. So, but otherwise, I think the government spending is going to be meaningfully higher, and some of these tailwinds, I think, will. It's not that the impact of this spending is felt only concurrently. Some of these tailwinds that will actually push us through maybe the first half of the next fiscal year as well. So I expect that the rebound in high frequency indicators, once the impact of the CRR cut. Remember that the RBI is also now addressing some of the concerns that had slowed down credit growth. So like the cut in CRR from 4.5% to 4% normalizes it back to where it was before 2022, and that allows the money creation engine in the economy to start to work again the way it used to. This is high-powered money, so over a period of time, given the money multiplier, it can generate 5.5–6 trillion rupees, and therefore there should be enough money in the system for the banks to start to grow credit growth again. So some of this, I think, will be slow on the financial side, but I think the fiscal, we are already starting to see impact. I think on most measures, October was the bottom, and November onwards, some of the high frequency indicators are already starting to move up.
Right. Mr. Mishra, this is Harsh Saita here. Quick take on the repo. So your report suggests that repo will remain at 6.5%. Talk to us about the rationale behind that, and also your take on the new governor.
So see the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee's target is headline inflation. And we go into great depths in the report to show why, despite the fact that food versus CPI and vegetable versus food, both of them are at cyclical highs, meaning that you would expect that on a relative basis, food should see lower inflation than core, and within food, vegetables should see, and so therefore inflation should normalize. But the challenge is that these income transfer schemes that the states have initiated, and there's been a significant acceleration this year. So there is about 2 trillion rupees of monthly income transfers now happening to women. 20% of women are getting it. The target for this is the bottom 30-40% of the households, where the marginal propensity to consume is the strongest for food. Now, in segments like eggs or meat or milk, because there is very little of government intervention, and these are very open markets, the supply response is quite quick. In things like vegetables, where APMCs, and there are several constraints around storage, etc., the supply response comes with a lag, and therefore this additional demand, in our view, adds about 6-9 months of demand for supply, and that may take some time coming. And therefore, if the headline inflation averages 4.5 for the year, and that too because the high base effect of the October to December quarter will mean that October-December 25 is actually closer to 4%, means that for most of the year, and including in the March 26 quarter, the inflation numbers could be higher. And if that is the case, then I think the MPC, as per the regulations, I don't think will have the room to cut rates. There is another factor at play here, and which is that if the most you can cut is 50 basis points, see, unlike the Fed, which took rates to 525, 550, and there was at one point an expectation that they could cut by 175 to 250 basis points. If the most you can cut is 650 going to 600, meaning 6.5% going to 6%, I'm not so sure if it is even worth triggering that cycle. And therefore, so long as inflation expectations remain elevated, and if the growth does rebound, so remember that because of the normalization on the fiscal side, the normalization on the quantity of money side because of CRR, as well as, and this is something that we expect, has not yet happened, but we do expect that the RBI also will perhaps take a step back on the macroprudential side. So if credit growth really picks up, I think the need for rates to fall even 25, 50 basis points will not be there. That's the reason.
Okay, so that's interesting to watch, and thank you so much, Mr. Mishra. We would have loved to chat more, but we're going to hear from Sanjay Malhotra in just a minute from now.